the order that I see y'all. So I see Darlene, I see Damien, I see Allie, I see Lube, and then I see Christian. All right.
Okay.
And I only have 4 questions. I'm going to send these to y'all. These are just some updated ones. The 3 you all have seen before. No, 2. So here you go.
Matoka, did you say we were going to go in the same order?
Yeah. So I was going in the order y'all on my screen. So it's going to be Darlene, Damien, Allie, Lube, and Christian.
Now, I did read in the feedback that somebody said that.
I know. I asked about that, but it's hard when it's, what do you think, Jazz? When it's this format, it's hard to, because I don't want people speaking over each other.
So if you want to, you can just call out names. That's what I usually do. I just call out and say, hey, Christian, what are your thoughts? Lupe, what's your thoughts? Damon, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so perhaps for the first question, we'll go in that order, and then I'll make sure to back and forth it.
Perfect. And if you guys don't mind, can you give me a quick smile so I can get a screenshot? Perfect. All right, I'm good, thank you.
I don't have anything in my teeth, do I?
No.
Okay, good.
Hey, Matoka, where are the questions? Are you going to post them in the chat or just refer back to the email?
I'm going to send it to y'all in email.
Okay.
And then when the questions come in the chat, I'll say them out loud.
Okie dokes.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matoka Welch, and I am the Program Director for the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program here at Global Campus. This is part 2 of a discussion we started a month ago to really talk about some of the mental health and neurodiverse issues that we are seeing in our society, but specifically as it relates to COVID-19. Many of us have received the recent communication from Paul that we will be remote at least through August. And so as we're all in this process together, I'm going to be asking your questions to our lovely panelists about how to cope and deal with these times that we are in. With me today, I have Dr. Darlene Dempster, I have Dr. Damien Cummins, Dr. Allie Bangs, Dr. Lube Spiro, and Dr. Christian Dean. And if you all want to take a minute to just introduce yourselves again, we could get started with the questions for the panel.
Okay, well, my name is Darlene Dempster. I am clinical faculty with the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. I'm a counselor for 20 years, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Damien Cummins, and I am a core faculty here at Southern New Hampshire University in the counseling program, and it's quite an honor and privilege to be here with you guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandria Bangs. I'm in the admission department, undergraduate admission, and I'm excited as well to do a second part.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Lube Spiro, the Counseling Field Experience Manager for the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. Thank you all for such a great turnout the first time around and having us back for a second discussion. That was really cool. Thank you. Great to be here again.
I'm Christian Dean. I'm a clinical faculty member in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program here as well, and I have a limited part-time practice in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Diversity Council for hosting this event, this very necessary conversation. Two things we're going to be doing. We have some questions for the panelists. We also have your feedback from the first event that can help to guide us in some of the things you all want to hear. There's also the chat box where you can ask questions to us, and we will make sure that we get to those. To start us off, I'm going to speak with Dr. Dempster. The question says, now that I've been in quarantine for so long, I'm nervous about readjusting to the many complex demands of social interactions outside of my home. Do you have any suggestions to help with this transition?
Absolutely. And this is something a lot of us are experiencing right now. I've really been trying to be mindful of how I can use this experience of the quarantine to try to be more unplugged and more in touch with my needs and the needs of my family, rather than rushing about with all the to-dos of society. So maybe I've been utilizing, I'm part of a gym that has some online classes with meditation and yoga, so I've been practicing more with that. So asking questions of ourselves as we are starting to think about reconnecting with society. Who and what is most important to do right now? So let me give you an example. The other day, I have two kids, elementary school age kids, and they were chawing at the bit. They were irritable, they were grouchy, snapping at each other. I was like, okay, something's got to be done. So we thought about, what can we do? They didn't want to walk the dogs, so we decided, we thought about the park. So at that time, going to the park would involve exercise and being in nature, and it's a quiet neighborhood park where not a lot of people go. So what is the risk involved with certain activities? At the most, in this park, when it was busy, it had 10 people in it, and it's a big park. So and I'm lucky to have that in my neighborhoods. But so we thought, okay, this is a risk that is good. We can put on gloves. We can wear masks in case other kids are there. But the benefit, the risk to benefit ratio was pretty good in this particular example. So we thought, we can engage in this activity in a safe way, and it has a high payoff for mental health, for my mental health in getting the kids out of this house, and for my kids' mental health to get exercise and possibly be in a different environment where they could see other people. So I've been trying to ask those questions. What's most important to do right now? What's the risk of this activity? Can I engage in this activity with social distancing? Can I engage in this activity in a safe way? And what is the payoff? And then continue the quarantine activities that I've been doing to cope, and then slowly introduce activities that have the most bang for the buck. And so that's what's been working for us.
Thank you, Dr. Dempster. Dr. Cummins.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question, because it's whether you're part of a family, you're living by yourself, or whatever, in this kind of renegotiating your kind of understanding of acclimating to socialization, again, I think is really important for everyone, because I think there are a lot of mixed emotions coming out of this. There may be some fear of can I get the virus, or will I catch it going into this situation, or being around these people. There may be some anger about other people that aren't abiding by maybe some of the regulations and the rules and the things that states and government are trying to issue. And then there could be maybe even some guilt about how you're handling this situation. Maybe that you're not at the par of kind of maybe where you were before of parenting. Maybe you're not 100% in the way that you complete your job duties and everything around that. And I think part of this is being kind to yourself and recognizing too that under these circumstances and everything that we're going through, that it's okay to not be that 100%. it's okay to not have to function at that level because of the stressors, because of the anxiety, because of everything that is going around us. So with that in mind, I think knowledge is power. I think it's really important to understand where your information is coming from, how valid it is, and how you're using that information. If you're getting information off your news feed from Facebook, maybe from your uncle or something, probably not the best source. Maybe look at the CDC, look at Johns Hopkins University, pull from these valid information sources and not kind of pulling all the information off of your news feed or the nightly news that kind of sensationalizes a lot of stuff. And then from there, as Dr. Dempster was talking about, kind of negotiate that and see the risk benefits of what you're doing and what's going to be best for you. I think during this time too, it's also really important to be your own advocate. Always stress that to advocate for yourselves, and whether that's in your job situation or outside of the house, and advocate for what's important to you and what you need in this situation. Because I think in the end, I mean, you're going to be protecting yourself and also your family in these situations. So recognizing those needs, I think, is really important. Also, my grandmother had this really famous saying that I like to use a lot of times too: this too shall pass. And through all this situation and all that we're going to, we're going to get back to a situation that maybe not the normal we had, but a normal that is newly created by you and other people. So just understanding that this too shall pass, I think is important.
Thank you. Allie, what are your thoughts on this?
I completely agree. I think that baby steps are very important. You don't want to throw yourself into something because that itself, the situation itself is already overwhelming enough. So to throw yourself out there and put yourself in extra stress wouldn't necessarily be good for your mental health. So I feel like finding different ways, again, at your pace, to where you can slowly adjust and slowly get reacclimated with society. I know we've been a lot of us have been by ourselves, or if we have kids, and it's hard for everybody, and understanding that we all get it. We all are going through it. So we all kind of understand in different ways that this is going to be a challenge. And one thing I'm doing for example, for my daughter is she was supposed to graduate from elementary school. So kind of like getting people together or finding different ways, but still keeping that social distancing, maybe meeting up in cars and vehicles to slowly start seeing faces, so that when you actually go into an area where you're sitting near someone, you're kind of more acclimated with that social interaction.
Thank you, Allie. Dr. Spiro.
So I echo everything everyone has shared with you thus far. I happen to be a fact-based type of person, so I find comfort in knowing the facts. And just like Damien shared, try to stay off the news feeds and take a look at the guidelines, the CDC guidelines. And knock on wood, practicing those thus far has reassured me, and having that reassurance continues to help me to make the smart decisions in how I engage in practices outside of my home. And reminding myself, I think doing that, just literally reminding yourself you're doing the right thing, you're taking the right steps to keep yourself safe and keep your family safe, helps me to continue to make the appropriate decisions. But I can't speak enough about following the appropriate guidelines from the CDC and being very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Being very careful about not feeding into too much of the kind of opinions of what's working and what's not working, and sticking to the facts of what we have found to be helpful, and looking at it not just locally but globally. So it's taking some time and looking at other practices in countries where they have been successful. And that's what we have, and coming to terms and being okay with this is what we have right now, and let's do the best with what we have and keep moving forward. It brings me comfort. It may not be an answer, but it brings me comfort, and that's better than being really uncomfortable. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Last but not least, Dr. Dean.
Yeah, when I read that question, I'm going to take a different perspective. If that's okay. I see readjusting kind of to the many complex demands of social interactions outside the home again. And when I'm in the Army National Guard, so when I served in Iraq and I came back, there was a readjustment period. Like, how do I get back to, whatever my normal will be at that point, right, in my life? And I'll tell you, my invitation to everybody would be to visualize, to really think about it. What did I do before? And almost schedule out your day. What was my day like before all of this happened, right? What was life like before? What were my social interactions like outside the house before COVID-19 came into our world? And to really be intentional about, do I want it to be the same? How do I want it to be? And really take some time to think about that. And I know it sounds a little weird, but really close your eyes and visualize yourself, getting up in the morning, going out, connecting with people. How would you interact with them? How would you implement social distancing while interacting with them? And to try to mentally prepare yourself for that transition before it actually gets full blown, right? I heard baby steps. I love that. Just kind of taking it step by step and just really preparing yourself. And I watched Brain Games the other night, and they were adults versus children. And they had this test where they had to drive a little go-kart where the steering was reversed. So left, you actually go right, you actually go left. And where adults really struggled with that because they were so used to driving a certain way, as for children, they were able to adapt much easier because they weren't used to that. Well, we've been used to living life a certain way for all of our lives. The past 3 or 4 months have been, well, I guess 3 months really have been, 2 months have been vastly different. So we have that neuroplasticity where we could probably get back there much faster than we realize. So an invitation for everybody to just consider that there is hope, and that more likely than not, we can readjust in a nice, smooth fashion with intentionality and thought behind it.
Thank you for that. I do agree with you in terms of, just being flexible. I do think that probably a lot of people are feeling stretched in their flexibility because this is challenging us in ways we've never imagined before. To that end, the second question here says, the focus of the first panel seemed more geared toward people in relationships and people with children. What advice do you have for those of us who have been alone since March with another 2 to 3 months of remote work? What are some resources for those of us who might have limited support networks? And since you're on the screen here, I'll start with you, Dr. Dean.
Sure. That's, and I'll tell you this, in my clinical work, sometimes I hear that from clients. They're new to the area, they just moved to the Baton Rouge area, and then they're trying to make connections. And part of that challenge is really trying to reach out to anybody who may have someone in the area you live that they know, and trying to ask folks for help. Yeah, do you know anybody in this area? Can you help me get connected? And I do invite folks to, even though you'll be working remotely, to try to get out and make some kind of connection if possible. That may be if you go to, someone mentioned the gym earlier, going to the gym and making connections, going online. And I know this probably sounds a little weird, going online, but I'm sure there's meeting rooms, there's other ways to try to connect with people in different ways. And an invitation just to be creative with that, right? Ask people, you asked the question here, which I think is great, and it's a first step. How can I meet other people and make connections to feel more connected to individuals? I know our program has sometimes had a trivia night, I know there's a dance party that the university has. So anything you can do to try to stay connected on a regular basis, I think has a lot of value. So that would be my invitation, to just really stretch yourself in that perspective, to really try to make more and more connections.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Spiro?
The folks that know me know that I'm an animal lover. And the one thing that has been truly a constant during this time is having my four-legged baby girls around all the time. They keep me engaged. They go on walks with me. I find comfort in that. And that may be or may not be an option for you. It doesn't have to be a dog or a cat. It could be a hamster, something that's different. But having to care maybe for someone else during this time, I think can be helpful in easing some of that loneliness. They won't completely eradicate it, but I think that act of caring for someone or something like that can really assist many of us that may be experiencing some of that. And exactly what Dr. Dean said, Christian, connecting on social groups if you can, via different, platforms that we have, I think has been helpful for many people. It's really, it's a huge adjustment. It's a huge adjustment in how we see the world, and being okay with what we feel, and not being too critical of ourselves when we're feeling it, and having that good cry when you need to have that good cry. I just think there's some options that we can, find ways to comfort ourselves. And the other thing that I've shared with a lot of, folks that have struggled with this is creating a structure for yourself. For whatever reason, that whole structure thing works. Having some level of predictability in an unpredictable situation can be really, I think, helpful in easing some of the, loneliness folks may feel.
Thank you for that. I too have four-legged children, and they have been quite helpful in this time. How about you, Allie?
I completely agree. It is very tough to be in a situation where you kind of feel like you're by yourself. And the great thing is that, like, a lot of jobs or a lot of communities will have these little posts if you go on social media, and you can see just how many groups that you could join, like the trivia nights, like was said. But if there isn't, maybe create one yourself. Maybe be able to be like, okay, I'm creating this group to invite other people in. Another thing I found that has been helpful for me and my kids is we've actually kind of went out and posted, like, if anybody needs help. Is there anybody that needs toilet paper or anybody that needs lunches for today? And we've actually been able to wrap them up in plastic bags and drop them off at doorsteps, and they've kind of reached out to us. And it's been a great way to interact, but also it goes into that caring for other people, being able to be like, you know what, we have the time to do this. Maybe someone else is struggling, and that actually gives you that benefit of interacting with them, but also them that benefit. And then they feel a little more comfort in being able to reach out, and we'll talk to different kids, different adults even that have asked for help, and just see like, hey, how are you doing today? And that creates a new form of contact. And you're able to be able to be like, oh, I made a new friend during this time, or new communication. So I think that's really helpful too.
Thank you, Allie. Dr. Cummins.
So I kind of think about this, I guess, a little bit differently in some ways, but it also echoing a lot of what our panelists are talking about. I have a family and I have two kids, and sometimes they drive me up the walls and everything and want to pull my hair out. But I think about other individuals and people that live alone, and I couldn't imagine the isolation, the loneliness, and sometimes the depression and everything and sadness that some people may be going through in these situations. And so really from a mental health perspective, I think mental health is really key here. And so for some people that may be truly struggling with mental health issues, severe depression, or maybe even suicidal thoughts and ideations about taking their own life and everything, I think a lot of times too, it may be hard to kind of reach out. It may be hard asking for help and really kind of seeking out what they need to advocate for themselves or connect with others. And so in these situations, I think it's really important for those that need to do. And so those that do feel good in a healthy sense, and those that do feel that they're equipped and can handle situations like this, I think this is that opportunity and time to do something for others, to connect, to provide that sense of community, and asking these people, are you okay? I haven't heard from you in a while, or somebody that is maybe struggling or that you knew before, reaching out to them. And so I think that's kind of our purpose in some ways. And some of the happiest nations in the world are those that have a strong sense of community and connection with others. And so by providing that source and having others know that someone is out there for them is really important. So maybe for those that can't get out to reach and ask for help, on those that can provide that, I think it's important for them to do that. And it's a win-win because it also boosts happiness for both in those situations. And so it can help in all areas.
Thank you. And Dr. Dempster.
Yes. Sometimes when we're alone, negative self-talk can be exemplified. And some common negative thoughts that individuals can have are that no one likes us, we're not worthy of love from other people or of other people's time, or it would be a bother to others to hear from us. And this can be going on under the surface, and we could not even recognize that these thoughts are in our mind and are influencing our behavior, and it can really sap our energy. So one thing that can be helpful to do is try to make kind of a list of warning signs. How do we know that we're getting into this negative state with some of these with this negative self-talk kind of going on? Are we sluggish typically? Do we isolate? Do we have low motivation? Are we irritable, emotional? Things like that. So kind of what do we do when we get into this state with negative self-talk? Then trying to identify what thoughts are influencing these behaviors, the isolating, the emotionalness, low motivation. What are the thoughts that are going on underneath the surface? Sometimes it's helpful to write those thoughts down. So some common negative thoughts, just like before: others are too busy to spend time with me. I would bring others down. I'm a drag. Nobody wants to be around me. Then it's helpful kind of using a cognitive behavioral approach to counter those thoughts. So sometimes we're thinking that others are judgmental, perfectionistic, and they are unwelcoming. They don't like me. Really, is that really true? Most people are pretty kind if you get to know them, and so really that thought is an extreme thought, which isn't really helpful. And also we're thinking of ourselves that I'm weak, I'm rigid, I'm static, I'm a drag, nobody likes me. But really that's not true. We've been through a lot of difficult things before. We have strength and we're flexible. So when we consider our motives in the world as a good person who wants to try to do good things. Yes, we make mistakes. We all make mistakes and none of us are perfect, but our intentions are good. It makes it a little easier to say, like, okay, maybe I'm not so bad to talk to. Maybe others would be okay with talking to me. And when we start to think others have good intentions too, when we remember the goodness of others and the kindness of others, it makes it a little safer to try and reach out. So it is scary to reach out to other people, but trying to recognize our thoughts and recognize that they're irrational. We all have these thoughts. Everyone here is irrational and can have negative thoughts going on in our minds. So accept that about ourselves. And it's going to take some bravery to reach out to other people and to see what are our resources. But trusting ourselves and trusting other people can help with that.
Can I add something to that, Dr. Welch?
Please do.
Just real quick. I do want to emphasize, though, that, these are, I think what we're offering are some great suggestions and tips that you could definitely think about. But if it does get to a place where it's unbearable for you and you're finding that I don't feel like getting out of bed, I don't feel like, taking a shower today, I don't feel like, doing anything but laying in the bed and watching TV. And if TV, if it gets to a place where there is not one thing that you find pleasure in or happiness, there is no shame in reaching out for even additional support. And that's a real thing that many folks, especially if you have a limited support system, if you're isolated from your family and friends, that's real. And there is no shame in asking for some help that you may have to, in addition to contacting a, counselor, you may want to reach out to your PCP or a psychiatrist to assist during this time with medication possibly. So I think that's something to definitely consider. or at least have a conversation with a professional about, because this is a huge change in everyone's lives. So I just want to, sometimes I think people look at that as a last resort, or they feel shame around it. And I just, hope that isn't the situation for some folks, and that that those resources are there to assist.
I really appreciate you mentioning that, because I was going to bring up, the EAP that we have here through work. And it's important to realize that usually on a good day, when there is not a pandemic, when individuals are feeling depressed or sad, the first thing that typically happens is we isolate, we withdraw from others. And so people have been self-quarantining, people have been remote and working from home. And so you're already isolated. And so this notion, I think that people have been struggling with, and I've been hearing a lot of, is thinking that, I'm, as Dr. Dempster was saying, being hard on yourself and maybe comparing yourself to others and thinking other people have it all together and you're the one struggling. But many of us are just, we're all in this boat together, and trying to navigate these uncertain waters has been, our way of life for the past few months. And so reaching out, whatever that looks like, is always very, very helpful. The next question we have here, again, is geared toward relationship. It says, it has become clear during the quarantine that my relationship with my significant other is not where it needs to be. I'm not sure whether to continue in the relationship, or if this is even the right time to consider a heavy decision like leaving the relationship. What are some considerations that I can take into account regarding the situation? And I'll give it to you first, Dr. Cummins.
So, love in the name of COVID. This is a really difficult and can be a stressful, challenging topic in any kind of relationship. There's so much worry going on, and fear and lack of control of what's happening outside of us. And then you're trying to maintain your own relationship in your own kind of confined house and walls and everything else. My first and really kind of immediate reaction and thought about this is, if you're in harm's way, then yes, immediate decision does need to be made. If it's not dire, if it's not a harmful situation, then I really encourage people to not make rash decisions, especially in these times of trauma, of pandemic, of really stressful situations, because our brains aren't functioning truly rationally enough to where we can devote that time, energy, and understanding to question maybe we should or shouldn't stay in these relationships. With that in mind, there's some specifics I think that could be directed towards relationships that might be able to help in some of these situations, that maybe later on after the pandemic and after everything has changed, that you can kind of question some of this and see if things are working. I think a huge part of being in a relationship is being a team. If you feel like you're kind of working on this and in the relationship kind of solo and it's not a team format, then I think a discussion needs to be had, because I could not see myself doing what I'm doing now without my wife in this, and especially being a buffer. And an example, as of right now, we have someone working on our air conditioner because our air conditioning went out yesterday. And so I'm trying to find and scramble to get a room to where I can be and do this video without the repairman messing up and making noise and everything else. So she's outside buffering, and I think that's huge. I think people need that buffer. And my grandmother used to always say that in any relationship, you can't always be 100%. You can't be 100%, and your partner can't always be 100%. And so during those times when one may be lower in that percentage or whatever, that's when maybe you need to pick it up. And at times in relationships, it's hard to kind of self-ship and maybe the ways that you can contribute or whatever. But and what I like to do is really kind of externalize what's happening in a relationship. So if there's a problem, if there are stressors, if there are issues in a relationship, maybe we can externalize that problem to a way that we can see it as both my partner and I, so that we can see what portion of this I can work on, where things are going wrong, and how I can help be a part of the solution in this. And I think that's really important. And I know that kindness, empathy, and just being grateful for a lot of maybe areas of what's working, because during these situations it can be extremely stressful. And it's almost kind of like a pressure cooker. But you had in your relationship before the pandemic, it's going to be under a magnifying glass at this point, because anything that's happening prior that may have been just a minor stressor, it's going to be exacerbated and look even bigger now at this point. And I know communication is huge in situations like this. So if you're not open, if you're not sharing, if you're not communicating in a healthy way, then it's really going to be a deterrent and kind of break down the relationship. And I know too that maybe this is an adult platform, but sex is also a really big part of relationships. And if that's not being performed or it's not in a healthy way, then the communication areas and the rest of the relationship are going to kind of fall apart as well. So I just want to kind of add that in there.
No, I appreciate you speaking to that. And I was intentional about calling on you, and I'm also going to call on Dr. Dean next, because you all are our marriage and family therapists. And so, Dr. Dean, can you add to the question about the relationship and issues that have been sort of exacerbated because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dr. Cummins that it's kind of a difficult time to make a big decision, right, like that. But that's not to say that you should or shouldn't. It's not my place to say that someone should or shouldn't do that. But one of my favorite questions to ask people is this: if your son, daughter, brother, sister, best friend, coworker came to you and said, and wrote that question and say, look, this is my relationship. This is what I'm going through, right? And they told you everything that you're experiencing, but you heard it from their mouth. What advice would you tell them? And then I would just ask you to consider that for yourself, right? If you would advise them that, hey, maybe this is a good time to leave, or that you should look to move on to something else, then maybe that's what will work for you. If you think you would say, well, stay in, see what happens, give it more time, seek some couples counseling, then I would encourage you to consider that. So I think sometimes we don't give ourselves the grace and love that we do for other people we care about. So I think that's one way to maybe try to replicate that for ourselves. The other thing I ask people to consider is a simple distress scale, 0 to 10. 0 being no distress, 10 being extreme distress. How distressed are you now in your current relationship? And then if you were to leave either now or later, and having to move out, having to find another place, all those logistical components that come along with that, right? What distress do you think you would be in if you were to do that, and for how long? Because that's the other factor, right? If I'm at an 8, potentially for the rest of my life in this relationship, right? Versus I'd be at a 9, but it would only be 2 months. So that's another way to kind of try to gauge whether or not it would be in my best interest to make a decision. In this case, any decision besides relationships, in my opinion. So that's something I try to help folks consider when trying to make these very difficult decisions.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. Allie, what are your thoughts on this?
I am a big advocate of not making permanent decisions based off of what could be temporary emotions. Because a lot of times when we have high emotions on something, we want to make a rash decision, but then we regret it later. Other times it can be that you don't regret it, but I know that sometimes when we have heightened emotions, we can't make rational decisions. So what really stood out for me in that question is where it needs to be, because my definition of where something needs to be may not be the next person's definition. It may not be your spouse's definition of where it needs to be either. So having that communication on, like, this is what I feel needs to be happening. Maybe you're just not on the same page there. Maybe they don't understand what you feel your needs are. And that could range for so many different needs, especially male to female. Everyone's needs are different. So how can a spouse come to you and be like, okay, we need to have this conversation. I'm not making a huge decision right now, but we need to know where your page is and where my page is, and let's try to come together, at least in this moment. And then when this is all over, let's reevaluate. Let's sit down and be like, okay, now that everything's changed, this is where I'm at, this is where you're at, and then make a decision. I think something like that takes time. You can't just be like, oh, this is over, I can't do it anymore. It's a process.
Thank you, Allie. Dr. Dempster, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. You can hear me, right? So I think it's really important when you're talking about the potential for divorce to acknowledge the reality of intimate partner violence because, of course, intimate partner violence is very complicated. We don't really have time to fully address this issue, but the most dangerous time in intimate partner violence relationships is when the person who's being abused leaves the relationship. So it's very important to bring that up, to acknowledge that reality, and to talk about how important it is to have a safety plan in such situations. So the hotline, again, I posted it with other resources in the comments, but it's 1-800-799-SAFE. And I also posted information about how to safely look up resources if you're being closely monitored. In terms of ending, when a person is considering ending a relationship, I teach a course in my community for helping children to cope with divorce. And one of the things that it talks about in that program is that people are in different places. Some people are in the place of, I'm done with this intimate partner violence. Even if my partner were to make major changes, I'm done. Some people have mixed feelings. Some people would commit to the relationship if their partner were to make major changes. And some people would work really hard and they don't want to break up and they would work really hard to stay together. So in each one of those situations, there would be a different response. And so knowing where you are, if you're done with the relationship regardless, then seeking support for yourself, seeking a way to make plans toward independence would be appropriate. If you're in any one of the other places, then you would want to know, where is your partner? Where is your spouse/partner? What are their thoughts on it? Because if they're done with the relationship, then that would be good to know for you so that you're not holding on to hope and so that you can make plans for yourself emotionally, financially, all those other kinds of things. There is counseling that's called discernment counseling, which is not the same thing as couples counseling. And in discernment counseling, you can either do that as a couple or separately. And the goal is kind of like my mom used to read Red Book magazine, and they would have this article in there called, Can This Marriage Be Saved? It's like, is it possible for this relationship? Are these problems in our relationship surmountable or not? And that's what you explore in discernment counseling. So rather than trying to dive in and start fixing things, you just kind of take a step back and say, is it even possible to fix it? So those are some options. There are also great self-help books. I like this one by Notorious and Markman. It's from 1993, but it's a classic. We Can Work It Out, and it's based on research on couples. And I think it's a great book. I have no financial ties to this book, but it's one that I've used, and there are lots of other great self-help books that maybe you could start reading to kind of, figure out this complicated issue together.
Thank you, Dr. Dempster. And last but not least, Dr. Spiro.
This is a great question. And there's lots of considerations that one would make. I really liked how the person asked the beginning part of this, piece that my relationship is not where it needs to be. So to me, that says, you sit back and reflect, where do I want it to be? And assess from that point, is it because the quarantine that I'm discovering these things? Or were these things there before the quarantine, and now we just spend so much time together that I see them much more frequently and can't dismiss them like I could walking out the door to go to do whatever you were going to do that day. So, I mean, it think starts there for many of us in assessing that, but also acknowledging that how we've changed during the quarantine, how, our tempers might be a little bit shorter or quicker, and, understanding that about self, and having grace for the other individual and how it's impacting them. These are just considerations you make before you make a decision. Depending on the conditions of the relationship, of course, if it is in any way putting you in danger or others, that's very different than, I don't know if I like this person anymore or want to spend much more time after the quarantine, and then being realistic. But I always go back to this, honoring what you're feeling, giving it space, just being with, whatever that it is that you're feeling, and then, slowly trying to come out of it. But it's not, I personally will say that would not make a decision like this under these conditions, just because, I get upset when my toilet paper brand is not there, right? So that's a big deal. That wouldn't have been a big deal 6 months ago. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But such a small thing can feel so huge when we do not have much control of many things that we used to have control over. So that's another consideration you want to maybe think about.
Thank you so much for these fantastic responses. I think that's very, very good advice. And what I heard everyone basically say is, of course you're going to have your feelings because this is a very difficult time. And so there needs to be a space to have the feelings and also a space to sort of process from a thoughtful perspective, is this unbearable? And I do like what Dr. Spiro said, just recognizing too, the stress that we're all under. Like Dr. Spiro, I do have my preferred brands and still haven't been able to find disinfectant wipes. So this is just a very challenging time, and recognizing that and having grace for that, I think, is also important. We'll probably have time for to talk through one more question. But I also see in the chat, one of our colleagues, Dr. Nelson, posted a link to an article that also helps to identify strengths in times of crisis, which coincidentally sort of segues into our final question, which says, I feel like I have run out of ways to cope with what is going on. I feel overwhelmed, often feel like a failure. Do you have any suggestions for how someone can find inspiration during this time? And I will start with you, Dr. Dean.
A little anecdote here, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word for this, but when I teach skills to students and the students counseling skills, and they say, well, have you done this? Have you done that? I encourage them to consider that they probably have tried a lot of things on their own. That's what it sounds like this questions come from. Like they've done a lot of things, they're trying all these things, and they're kind of run out of resources or figuring things out. And I'll say, I think this is a great time for someone to consider counseling, right? There's the EAP program that's new offers, which I believe is so many sessions for free, right? There's no out-of-pocket cost for that. And I know a lot of clinicians, especially now, are doing telehealth. So even if you couldn't go see them in person, that you could at least do some form of telehealth. But I know some clinicians are wearing masks, asking their clients to wear masks and asking them to come in. So that's a potential option in some areas, especially if you feel that you want to take that risk. So this, I think, is a great time to consider counseling to get some additional support. And some of the things that Dr. Dempster was talking about with maybe some cognitive behavior therapy, or just someone who's going to be there to be supportive and be a resource for you. And that's what I would do if I felt I was at a point where I wasn't quite sure where to go, what to do, and I ran out of resources. I'd consider seeking advice and help, not advice, but help, assistance from a mental health professional.
Thank you. Allie, what about you?
I feel like during these times, when you're struggling to find inspiration, it's really important to find something that you love to do, whether that be painting or reading or singing, music. I find that sometimes when I can't find inspiration in one aspect, I'm able to find inspiration somewhere else and be able to kind of get it together at that point. Be like, wow, now I feel inspired. And now I'm going to try to transition this. What are the positives thinking of the positives. Okay, this is the positive of this, so this is where I can start pulling from. But it is also important to, I think mentorship is very important. Reaching out to people is very important, because if you can't find that inspiration within yourself, you may be able to kind of pull things of how other people are inspired, what they're doing to get inspired, and kind of find what works for you. So I think it is important. People are important. If you can communicate through Zoom meetings or texting, however you can reach out. But I think it is easier said than done sometimes in certain moments, but if you can just find something that works for you, then you should be able to reach out to them.
Thank you, Allie. Dr. Dempster, what are your thoughts?
Sorry. Yes, I think it's important to think about all of your needs among the different domains of wellness. So thinking about trying to get your needs met across the board. So if you've been only focusing on physical wellness by eating well and by getting exercise, maybe it's time to seek out spiritual wellness, because inspire was part of the question. So looking at all the different domains of wellness, and think about what is inspiring to you, what has been inspiring in the past. I like poetry and music and nature and meaningful social connections. So like I pulled out some of my poetry books and I placed them all around the house where it'd be easy to grab them. I reread The Little Prince. It's a lovely book. It's so beautiful. So trying to have things that are inspiring around you. Try to have meaningful goals that relate to either people you care about, or helping others, or what you want to accomplish in a relationship or with your work. Try to find meaning in your work. So there's so many ways that we can find meaning in our lives, and you can even plan for after the quarantine is over. Like if you're just hating this right now, try to make some goals for later on. If you are lonely and also kind of missing inspiration, I looked up, there's a chat board that was created for quarantine called Quarantine Chat. It's super cute. I downloaded it, and it makes you download this other app. I think it's called Dial Up, and then you go to it and it says, what did you have for breakfast? And you can sign up and have a conversation with another person in real time about what you had for breakfast, or look at the moon at the same time, or read a poem to each other. And so I thought that was kind of a funsy little creative way to connect with somebody else in real time and just add a little sunshine to your day. So those are just a few ideas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dempster. Dr. Spiro, what are your thoughts?
I think sometimes as adults we forget how much fun we used to have going and playing. Remember that? You could just go outside and play and do silly things. And but there's real research around that. Adults engaging in play and in engaging in activities that are fun in that way, whether it's someone I think said it, singing or learning a dance. So, my goddaughter introduced me to TikTok. I'm addicted. So, I'm learning all that. You may see a video of me out there doing a little dance, but learning that dance and then, being able to share it with her and do the screen share and stuff. And you get to see that, like, that's fun. And it makes me laugh and it makes me smile. But it's those types of things, like tapping into truly your inner child. Like, what are those fun things that I used to do when I was young, and allowing yourself the freedom and space to do it. Like, who cares? Who's going to see you do it? I mean, it's giving yourself that space to kind of explore those things that you once were adventurous and took a risk and did. And I do think that as adults, it's important to have some of that in your life. And engage in it when you can.
Thank you for that reminder. For some of you all on the counseling staff or on the meeting here, I did a wobble the other day. The song came on and I said, oh, let me wobble, because this is the song we always do at residency, and I've gotten a lot better. And it was fun. It was very, very fun. And it's important to tap into that kind of stuff. Last but not least, Dr. Cummins.
Yeah, so I think all of these suggestions are fantastic and very helpful for mental health and your overall well-being. I think another point to kind of consider and think about too with this is to think about the things that are not working for you. Is staying on your social network and your news feed and reading everybody's comments and the arguments and the division and everything, is that helping you? And a great way to kind of think about this is to be very intentional and understand how your body is working during these situations. When you read these things, take a moment and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Do I feel kind of icky and negative and sad and lonely or scared or whatever? Or is it boosting my mentality and my happiness? Do I feel good about this? Do I like this? And if so, kind of recognize these areas in your life that or maybe some that are bringing you down. Does that extra scoop of ice cream make you feel better? Or does it make you feel worse in these situations? And it could be either or. And I know a lot of times, I mean, people want that news. They want that kind of validation. And so waking up to hear the morning news, maybe that's not the best thing to do, to hear about the death rate, the toll of how things are increasing. And maybe going to bed with some kind of positive vibe or something that it really kind of sets your mind at ease, because during these stressful and anxiety-ridden times, it's really difficult to kind of find that peace, to find that harmony and inspiration. And so to kind of put some of this negativity of what's being filtered through our lives, putting that to the side and finding ways to kind of incorporate and build on those strengths, build on those positives that we already know that are part of our life. But a lot of the times we don't always accentuate those. I think that's really important. And to kind of what Dr. Spiro was talking about, one of our basic needs is fun. And during these times in our lives, it's so stressful and so difficult to really kind of incorporate fun into our lives because a lot of the resources that we had before are lacking. But this is that opportunity and that time to be creative and find some of these resources and avenues that maybe we didn't do before and kind of tapping into our childlike selves.
Thank you, Dr. Cummins, and everyone on the panel today. Thank you for the questions that came in, and we hope that we were able to touch on some of the concerns and questions that you all had. Before we conclude the panel, I wanted to remind participants to look in the chat and see the Qualtrics survey for feedback for the panel. And also I wanted to ask Jazz if he had any words that he would like to share.
Now, I just want to thank the panel as well as you, Matoka. You guys did a phenomenal job. On behalf of the Diversity Council, please continue to provide your feedback. We do this work to support you as well as ourselves, so your feedback is critical. We look forward to hosting future events. And if you guys have any ideas or things that you guys want to hear, please provide that within your feedback within the survey. We look at that on a monthly basis to figure out what we need to do and what's prevalent and what's needed within the community, within Global Campus and SNHU. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Jazz, and to everyone, thank you all. I don't know if our panelists have any lasting words. One thing I'll say to the participants is you're a lot stronger than you think. I think this has proven to all of us that we're much stronger than what we ever thought, and to have some grace for yourself. Any lasting thoughts from you all to the participants?
I'll close with just three things. Be kind to yourself, others, be grateful, and learn to adapt.
I did just want to add, for inspiration, sometimes watching some of those awesome graduation speeches that folks give, I think those are extremely inspiring. So I just wanted to, I saw one with Admiral from the Navy, a Navy SEAL guy. He did a great job, and whenever I watch that, I always get inspired. So sometimes just catching some of those on YouTube can be extremely helpful.
I was a fan of Some Good News, and I don't know John Krasinski, and I'm trying to give a helpless plug, but that also was quite inspiring to me during this time, just to, because as Dr. Cummins was saying, some of the news is just so negative, and this was just so positive and uplifting, and that was also very inspiring. So thank you for reminding me of that, Dr. Dean. Anybody else, lasting thoughts? All right. Thank you all. And until we see each other again.
Thank y'all.